Welcome to our first season of the podcast, Grow from Darkness. We are your hosts, Amanda Blackwood
and Chrysanthi Dokos from Coast to Coast. As some of our listeners know, we're both survivors of complex trauma, and it's our mission to help others experiencing similar issues.
This season, we're going to be digging into trauma reactions, their long-term consequences, and how we fight back to live our best lives.
I started to do some research last night on anger. I thought I just need to do a bit more to get a handle on things, make sure I'm on the right track. And I've made some interesting revelations about myself.
Let's talk about that. That's super cool. So, of course, today's topic is about the trauma reaction of anger. And what is it? Are there long-term consequences to not dealing with it? And how do we fight back against it?
That's it.
So I want to let you kick us off. Tell us about anger. What have you discovered?
Trauma and anger, what is the connection? I really wanted to break it down, and I actually started to become very self-aware of a few things. So one of the things about anger and PTSD, and so trauma, is that people can get stuck in that autonomic response, the fight-flight response that we've talked about previously in our episodes, and how it's an automatic response. When you're threatened by something, your body goes into that sort of fight-flight mode, and there's increased cardiovascular stuff. Your autonomic system just powers along, and people with extreme PTSD, which is, the response to trauma, can actually get stuck in that extreme response. Like, it's almost like an addiction to that, the way that our bodies respond to threats. And the way that actually is evident in their own behaviour when there isn't a threat and that they're stuck in that anger sort of response is that they're irritable and can just get angry at the simplest of things, and it actually creates problems in their interpersonal relationships, like at work or in the family. They have problems with their sense of self and place in society. And one of the things that I found really interesting in my research is that with veterans of war, they're under a constant a constant threat of their lives being taken, or the lives of their fellow combat people. I can't think of the right word. They're soldiers. And one of the things about being in that sort of constant state of arousal is that they've learned through their training to follow the rules. And yes. They have to do everything by the rules to keep themselves safe, to keep their fellow soldiers safe. And when they come back into civilian society, when people around them don't follow the rules, they get angry because they've been taught that to stay safe, you've got to follow the rules, and they feel out of control if people don't follow the rules. And when I was reading this information yesterday, like a penny dropped for me. And it was like, wow, hey, that's me. When people don't follow the rules, I just get really angry. And my daughter often says to me, Mum, road rage. When I'm in the car and people don't follow the road rules, I get really angry. And it's sort of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's sort of like, where does this part of me come from? And she goes, Mum, you're angry. Just cool it. This is road rage. You can't behave like that. Well, they haven't followed the rules, And
yeah,
And then I calm down, once that moment's passed. But it's really interesting. And one of the things I found a couple of years ago, before I finished up with my teaching career, is that, we have expectations as staff. You've got to, follow the rules so that you can be the best teacher you can be and provide the best outcomes for your students. So when I was told what the rules were, I was fine. I knew what to do. But then if my colleagues around me didn't follow the rules, oh my goodness, I just let loose, you know.
Right.
Not necessarily towards them, but, I would feel that internal rage and anger, and it would affect me. And then obviously people around me must have picked up on there's some hostility here, what's going on. And it impacted on my workplace relationships with some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've noticed a lot of that myself too. Um, so when I was doing the research for the book series that I'm working on, yeah, I compared it to like having a bucket filled with water to the very brim, and even one more drop that would cause that water to overflow from the bucket. That was
Mm-hmm.
my level of anger of dealing with everything. And all it took was the tiniest little thing to set me off, and I would be angry. And I used this as what I thought was the time was a superpower to alienate people, because I kept on saying, well, maybe I'm better off if I alienate these people because people only end up hurting me anyway. And this way I won't get hurt anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's a self-preservation kind of thing, isn't it? It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
the irony is that those people around you could actually be helping you heal, and you're stopping that by alienating them.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of those people were really good people. And I look back now and I regret having treated them the way I did. And I ruined many very valuable friendships with people that could have been long lasting friendships. They were
Mm,
people that were there for me when nobody else was.
mm, mm,
Yeah. And I've reached out since then and tried to kind of build those relationships back up. But sadly, that was not in the cards for us.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah. So,
But the
I
thing
mean,
is, I think the important thing here is that self-awareness,
right,
because if we do become self-aware, we can actually do something with that. Having that knowledge is power. If we're not self-aware and we continue to behave in that way, well, then we're just stuck.
right, right. And it is handy. I mean, the anger reaction is a normal reaction that people have because it's supposed to exist. You've had something traumatic happen to you, and it's perfectly okay to be angry about it,
Mm,
but you
mm,
have to accept what is going to be a healthy kind of anger for the short term versus what's a very unhealthy anger versus anger in the long term.
mm, mm,
I mean, it can be anything from irritability to an anger outburst to defiance against the rules, anger at other people not following the rules. But probably one of the most common ways that a trauma survivor that I've found in my research can exhibit their anger is with sarcasm.
mm. Yeah, yeah.
I've had a few people tell me, now I feel attacked. You had to bring sarcasm into this. That's my automatic go-to, and I can't believe that that's a trauma reaction. It can't be, and it absolutely is.
It
People
is.
use sarcasm all the time as a defense mechanism.
Mm, mm. And it's really interesting, just going back to what you were saying before, anger is actually a core component of a survivor's response to trauma. It's actually an adaptive response rather than a maladaptive response, because it's reflecting the survival response in human beings.
Right.
Uh, because we have, if we're under threat and we become aroused and angry, it actually helps us to fight back and survive whatever the traumatic situation is. particularly if, you're in a violent situation or your life is being threatened. Having that anger response is part of the fight response, which is, critical to us surviving as a human being. So, yeah, initially it's actually a really, really positive thing. And I think it's important for our listeners to understand that anger isn't all bad.
Right. Right. It can be in some situations. It can be an absolutely horrible thing, like you mentioned before we started recording, especially in the workplace. It does so much to somebody, and it does so much to impact somebody's job, somebody's professional relationships, somebody's personal relationships. It nearly ruined the career of a woman that I knew, a lawyer that I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I talk about her briefly in the book. She had been working at this law firm for something like 15 years. And she had a traumatic event happen to her. And for the following 2 years, she had isolated herself from everyone at work so much that, and she had anger outbursts so often
Mm.
that the firm was debating on whether or not to ask her to leave permanently. She nearly lost her job.
Wow.
So she recognized finally that she needed some professional help. She would not see a therapist or a counselor because she felt like she should not be forced to tell anybody about her trauma. It was hers. She owned it, and she was trying to figure out how to deal with it herself. So she came to
Mm-hmm.
me for some help, and how do I find some more productive ways to cope with it? So I gave her a few hints and tips and told her how to fight back against some of the stuff that was going on inside her head or her heart. And finally, she had a meeting with her colleagues at the law firm, and she let them know, without going into detail, what it was that she was having to deal with. And after that, they started working on a full reconciliation between all of them. She decided to take an anger management class, and that was additionally super helpful. And she and I still
Mm.
contact each other now just to check in and see how everything's going for her. But she says that dealing with her anger is the only thing that saved her career.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it becomes so ingrained in our sense of being that we can't see it. We just can't see it. And there are, basically anger impacts us on our body or through our body because our body becomes aroused. It then can impact on our behavior and our thoughts and beliefs. And so it's those three main elements that need to be dealt with through counselling, or as this woman did, an anger management course, in order to be able to cope with those angry feelings and be able to move beyond them.
Yeah. Yeah. And can you remember, what's the last time that you were angry and you didn't understand why?
Good question. I've had some workmen doing some renovations at my house recently, and things weren't going according to our arrangement. And I found myself a few weeks back now, just over the stupidest thing, being really, really angry and thinking, I've got to get these workmen out of my house. I can't have them here anymore. It's just overwhelming. And yeah, it was really interesting. It was just, I could feel the anger coursing through my body, the adrenaline, and yeah, it was horrible. Really horrible. And it was something that we could simply fix through a conversation, which we eventually did. I sat with those feelings for a couple of days and contacted the guy in charge, and we had a meeting, and I sat down and said, look, these are my concerns, and we were able to handle things really well, and everything's back on track again.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic. And it's amazing what communication like that can do for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's only been, in my, I guess, almost 2 years now of being with my husband, there's only been one time we've ever had like a really kind of fight.
Mm-hmm.
We don't typically fight because we're both so good about communicating, because we've both been through so much stuff that we've had to learn how to communicate separately.
Mm-hmm.
And the one time that we got into a fight, it was because something happened and it scared me. I had a trauma
Mm-hmm.
reaction and I snapped at him. And when
Mm-hmm.
I snapped at him, I said something that was not very nice.
Mm-hmm.
I think I called him crazy or something, and it was vicious of me. It was an absolute trauma reaction, and we didn't speak for a few hours, and then when everything kind of calmed down, we came back together. We talked it out and we figured it out, and that's where my I didn't even know that I was angry. I
Mm-hmm.
was scared, and it came out as anger, and it
Mm-hmm.
was awful. Oh, I felt so bad just seeing the look on his face. He was brokenhearted that I snapped at him like that. It crushed me. It was terrible. He didn't deserve that.
No, he didn't. But the positive thing was that you could both sit down afterwards and work through it. Because, let's be honest, Amanda, we're all human and we have these emotions and we will behave like absolute cows or whatever at times. I had something a little bit more expletive in my head.
Hey, it's our podcast. You can say what you want.
I don't want to offend anybody. Yeah, so I think it's important to be kind to ourselves and realize that, as long as we can be self-aware and sit down and talk it through, that actually builds trust. It builds love between you, because you can see that the other person can see that you're self-aware and that you take responsibility, and you, as the person who's had the outburst, can see that well, this person's still going to love me even though I behave like a total twat, because I've owned it. And I can see where this behavior's come from. That, I think, in terms of relationships, that is the key critical point in being able to be open, authentic, and develop that trust.
Absolutely. And it's so important to be able to have those kinds of people in your life, to be able to pick who those safe people are that you can talk to about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Starting the discussion is one of the hardest parts of getting through all of these stages. It's nice to be able to get past the denial, and it's so ugly to go into that anger stage and you're just angry at everything and everyone. But figuring out who the appropriate people are to talk to about what you're going through it's such a huge step to be able to still have that kind of relationship in your life, and hopefully start moving on through the next stages.
Exactly.
But there were so many reasons, including anger, that kept me from being able to talk to somebody when I was going through that. I had all these fears. I had this fear that they were going to judge me. They were going to blame me for what happened. So victim blaming. I was afraid that they weren't going to believe me. I was terrified that there was going to be some retribution or retaliation against me for telling the truth about what somebody else had done. There's always the biggest fear of having to relive whatever the traumatic event is, because you have to talk about it. And when you talk about it, you remember it. There were so many things.
You relive it through your body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you're basically ending up in a very, very vulnerable place. Right. All those things that you've just listed actually makes you very, very vulnerable and feeling unsafe.
Right. And how do you do that when you're angry?
And you're angry because you're feeling unsafe.
Right. It's like this really weird kind of spiral. You just keep coming back to the same spot. You're angry.
Yeah.
And you don't know what to do about it.
A bit like those wheel mice in the wheels, chasing themselves. That's the best analogy I can give.
Yep, yep, chasing their own tails.
Yeah.
My grandfather on hairpin turns on mountain roads, he used to call them kiss your own butt turns because you turn so hard you could reach out and kiss your own butt, and that's what it feels like.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
let's see.
Well, we need to talk about, like the long-term consequences. And
Yeah, that's
I've
what I
got
was just gonna say.
I've
What have
got
you got? You
three.
got something there.
I've got three. So the first one is where am I? So the first one is the arousal side of things. So I'll just mention the three and then go back to them. So it's arousal that actually takes place in our body. It's the behavior, so how we respond to situations, and our thoughts and beliefs. So traumatic events impact on us and therefore influence the way we see the world. And post-traumatic anger comes out in those three ways: arousal, behavior, thoughts and feelings. So do you want to start with arousal in terms of, the activation of cardiovascular, or do you want me to keep going?
Oh yeah, talk about that one. The whole what it does to your body, because a lot of people
Yeah.
don't realize that anger is so much more than just a basic emotion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is the horrific thing about it, because that anger, that arousal in the body actually, as I said, increases your cardiovascular system. It sort of, there's blood coursing through your body. There are hormones coursing through your body like adrenaline. Your glandular system is activated, and your brain systems associated with the emotion of survival are just like on fire. And then there's muscle tension, like really increased muscle tension when you're angry. So if this is your body's normal state, or continual state, it's actually putting so much pressure on your whole physical being, and that's when all sorts of diseases and so forth start happening. Like, so much evidence has shown that stress is related to heart disease, for example, to cancer, to autoimmune disorders. So that stress level comes out through anger and then impacts on our bodies, which is, why in our societies, modern day, we're getting such higher levels of those lifestyle diseases in our community.
Right.
So it basically, being aroused in this way, actually, this is the irony of it, it actually intensifies our actual emotions and physical experience of the anger. So it's like a loop within itself. It's and you're constantly feeling on edge, you're feeling keyed up and irritable, and you're so much more easily provoked. Like that example that you gave of the lady, the lawyer, and how
Yeah.
she was responding in the workplace. That's exactly what I've been reading in terms of the body's arousal through anger.
Yeah. It's a terrible thing. And there's two different basic forms of the behaviors that go with the anger.
Mm,
So it's there's two different types of aggression. There's an impulsive aggression and an instrumental aggression
mm,
that feed into this. Now, the typical trauma response is that of impulsive aggression. It's known as also reactive aggression, where you react against things that come up, right?
yeah.
Um, and there's strong emotions all inside the impulsive aggression. But when you don't get a handle on that impulsive aggression, eventually it can grow into an instrumental aggression. Instrumental aggression, also known as predatory aggression, um, that's where you start to actually seek out to do harm rather than reacting to
Mm,
other things around you.
Yeah.
So as an example, starting a nasty rumor about somebody is an impulsive aggression, but orchestrating a false rumor of abuse or neglect that could cause a child to be taken away from their home and
Yeah.
put into foster care, that is a predatory
Yeah.
aggression. That
Yeah.
is, you are specifically designed to cause injury to another person.
Mm. Yeah.
And definitely that is one of those long-term anger issues that people really need to figure out how to deal with, because I see this so often.
And that's when, people become perpetrators.
Right. Right. And,
Yeah.
I've heard it said over and over and over and over again that hurt people, but I have to rebuke that.
I agree.
Hurt people don't hurt people. Unhealed, unhealthy people hurt people.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
we've both been hurt and we've never had an excuse to hurt somebody else, right?
And if we have, we've suffered the guilt of that and tried
Yes.
to, repair things. And yeah,
Right.
yeah. So there's that consciousness of how you're behaving and impacting on others.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So it's really interesting you describing that, because some of the reading that I was looking at was saying that there tend to be two, excuse me, two responses generally to this heightened anger in terms of arousal in our body. And you mentioned, impulsive stuff. So often people can either go down the track of seeking out experiences that actually require them to stay alert and ward off danger, so kind of risk-taking behaviour.
Right.
Or they can actually then do the opposite. To try and reduce that internal tension, they can turn to substance abuse and alcohol and so forth. So it's a really interesting response.
Right. And it can go in so many different directions too.
Mm, mm, exactly. Yeah.
So some of the warning signs for that aggressive or that angry behavior, you were talking about heart rates,
Mm.
a quickened pulse where you can feel your heart beating up in your throat or in your head and it's thrumming, and that you swear somebody else can hear it.
Yeah.
That's a that's a bad sign.
I've been there a few times.
Right. Sweating, breaking out in a
Oh,
sweat with
yeah.
no reason.
Yeah. Oh, and
Tightening your
profusely
fist.
sweating. Oh, my God, it's horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Sweating, tightening up your fist, you're clenching your jaw. Sometimes you
Mm,
can actually see people doing this in movies and stuff.
mhm.
And it's interesting because I will notice somebody clenching their jaw when it's not even an angry scene, but I can tell that there's some kind of stress going on while they're filming that scene, even though there's no set stress specifically being portrayed in the scene.
Oh, wow. Gosh, you're so perceptive. That's impressive.
Sometimes. Let's see. Some of the ways that I have discovered of fighting back against these angry impulses and stuff when you're feeling them. There's a 5 sense technique. Have you heard of that?
Yeah. Do you want to take us through it? That's really cool. I'm glad you've mentioned that.
Sure. Yeah, I use this one a lot. I have it printed out in several places. I've got it printed on a little card in my wallet. So it starts with, what are 5 things that you can see? And I think we should do these together just for fun. So 5 from me right now. I have flowers that are drying up from Valentine's Day, my computer screen, my phone, a nail file, and a stack of books I need to read. What are 5 things that you can see?
I can see the bay in front of me. I
Ooh,
can see my purple and pink pens. I can see my Chinese teacup. What am I up to?
that's
Um,
3.
that's 3. I can see my Chinese money plant, and I can see my stapler.
Nice. Okay. So then four things. What are four things that you can hear? For me, I can hear my cat purring on my lap, um, cars driving by on the street outside. I can hear um, your voice when you're speaking. And then what's one more thing I can hear? I can hear it's kind of quiet. Oh, there's music in the neighbor's house. I can hear through the wall. There's one. There's my four.
Fantastic. I can hear lots of birds in the background. I can hear cars going by. I can hear my voice, and I can hear the fridge in the background.
All right. Three things you can feel. I can feel my cat's fur. He's very soft. My keyboard, the clicks of my keyboard. And I can feel the soft wrist mat in front of the keyboard, soft and squishy.
I can feel my bottom on the chair. It's quite firm. I can feel the warm blanket around my legs, and I can feel skin on my hands as I rub them together. It's a bit chilly this morning.
Oh. So next up is two things you can smell. I can smell the flowers from Valentine's Day that are definitely getting old. And now I have something else I can hear. Your traffic. I can smell a caramel candy on my desk.
Okay. Well, since having had COVID 3 times, my sense of smell has gone, so I cannot smell anything.
Can you see anything that you would normally be able to smell?
Flowers. I've got a little rose sitting in a bowl. I could have been able to smell that. And, the coffee in my cup.
Oh, that's a good one. It's one of my favorite smells. And one thing you can taste. I have I have a massive jawbreaker sitting on my desk that I just take a couple of licks off of every day.
Well, I was sitting here sipping coffee before, so I can still taste the coffee in my mouth. Although it's not that strong, as I said, because I don't have my sense of smell.
Yeah. How long have you been without a sense of smell? That kind of stinks.
It does. Probably the first time I got COVID was in June of last year, and ever since then I've had a problem with my sense of smell.
Oof. Wow. And we had it in November of 2021, and my husband's sense of smell and taste has never fully recovered. Poor guy.
So. It's not fun, but anyway.
Yeah. So those five, the five sense technique, five things you can see, four things you can feel, three things you can hear, two things you can smell, and one thing you can taste. So if people jot that down, or if they print it out on a business card, something of that size, and keep it in their wallet, a lot of times it can help to calm somebody down from a panic attack or an anger or anxiety issue, something like that. Let's see, what other ways can we fight back against allowing that anger to take hold of us?
Well, that was sort of like a meditative kind of or mindfulness kind of technique. I find when I'm really aroused, excuse me, I just walk it off.
Yes.
I walk it off, and I'm almost marching.
Yeah. Yep. And people part the waters to get out of the way too. It's a beautiful thing, man.
They do. I get away from her.
Yeah, walking away from the situation or the person and going for a walk to burn off that energy. You can do both, or you can do both at the same time.
Yeah. Because it actually allows you to get your body in that sort of calmer state, and also allows you to, well, you're not interacting with that person anymore. So you're actually breaking the cycle of any kind of negative behavior. And it allows you, well, it allows me to go into my thoughts and, you know, really think about what has just happened, why have I responded in that way, and, you know, is it a justifiable response?
Right. Right.
But,
So, and there's also different ways to be able to reframe negative thoughts that somebody's having or experiencing.
yeah.
And I've had some people try to tell me, and I'll give an example here in just a second, but I've had some people try to tell me that what I'm doing is giving somebody else an excuse for bad behavior, but that's not it at all. It
Mm,
is absolutely about reframing what it is that I'm thinking so
mm,
that I don't allow it to bother me quite
yeah,
so much.
exactly.
Um, as like if somebody cuts you off in traffic, our automatic reaction is to have negative thoughts towards them and to get quite
Mm,
upset about it. But I've started reframing it after an experience I had a few years ago. And I think maybe that person didn't see me. Maybe there's a medical emergency. There could be any number of things that we are not aware of.
mm,
So
mm.
years ago, when I was a flight attendant, I was flying with another flight attendant who was supposed to take care of first class while I took care of coach.
Yep.
And when we took off, she refused to take care of anybody in first class. She was refusing to do her job at all. She sat down in one of the few empty first class seats and started studying a school book instead. So I didn't worry about it. I didn't complain at the time. I had a job to do. I went and took care of all of first class, and then I put my trolley cart together and I started wheeling it back to coach and took care of all of coach by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Wheeled it all the way back up front. She still didn't talk to me. She still didn't say anything. She didn't thank me, nothing. I just let it go. I didn't do it to get her thanks. I did it because it needed to be done and because we had customers who were expecting service.
Mm, mm.
We went on this trip. We flew from LA down to Guanajuato, Mexico. We
Oh,
stayed the
wow.
night. And on the next day, when we flew back from Mexico back into Los Angeles, when we landed, she received a phone call when she turned her phone on. And I overheard part of the conversation. Her 4-year old had just been diagnosed with leukemia.
Oh, my goodness.
She didn't know how to deal with it.
Mm,
And I could have had some really negative thoughts about her. I could have called the
mm,
company and,
mm,
made her day so much worse. But instead, I just dealt with what needed to be done. I figured there had to be some purpose or some reason. I didn't know what it was, but, you know, God willing, I would find out. And when I found out, everything just made so much more sense to me.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's so important for our listeners to try and understand that often someone's behavior is not a reflection on you, but, you know, so many of us have things going on that no one else is aware of. And it's about having that compassion towards other people and understanding. Because one of the things, it's really interesting that you bring that up, because in my experience teaching, I've struggled with some of my colleagues who have automatically made assumptions about students who've lost their cool or done the wrong thing, and very judgmental. And I've always taken the approach with my students that, you know, for them to behave in that way, something's going on. You know,
Right.
people don't deliberately behave in a horrible way. Particularly children, it's usually a response to something. And I used to find myself getting angry at my colleagues who would just make judgments and not allow those children to just be and help them to self-regulate or find other ways of dealing with their anger.
Right.
Uh,
They're kids. They haven't figured out ways to be able to deal with it yet.
exactly, exactly. And I think that brings us to a really interesting thing here, because often with early child abuse, for example, children don't actually learn adaptive ways to respond to a threat, and they become stuck in that mechanism that they've developed. And so their behavior towards others as they, as they grow older is sort of stuck in that mode.
Right.
And it's really important that we do address it, in the education system, but also as individuals, as we become older and get into our adulthood. It's important that we do focus on our behaviour and our thoughts and beliefs, and actually find ways of, as you said, reframing situations and thinking about our belief systems. Because one of the most common beliefs that people with PTSD have is that they can't trust anyone.
Yes.
And that's one I've dealt with for a long time in my life. And I actually think I'm only just, at nearly 57, coming to terms with that and accepting that that's where I've been in the past, and that I'm working really hard on that, really working hard on that.
And it's one of those things that we keep working on too. It's not something you ever really master unless you're some magical being like Gandhi. There's always going to be something that's going to come up that's going to be upsetting. And it's okay to be upset. It's just not okay to take out your anger on somebody else, or, allow it to alter who you are.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And of course, it's also really important to recognize if someone is being aggressive or angry toward you. You have to make sure that you're protecting your own physical and mental health too. You got to try to stay calm. You got to try to avoid escalating things if somebody is getting angry, and then get out as soon as you can. And that anger can blow up. We have experienced it from our own side, but I think both of us have experienced it from the other side also, feeling somebody else's anger and aggression towards us.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's going back to what we were saying earlier, is that is part of the trauma response with PTSD. We've ended up in that situation because of some sort of traumatic event that it's occurred, or, more chronic events. Yeah. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there.
You're good. I did that earlier when I had a cat screaming at the door.
Anger is a trauma response, flat out.
Yep. And it's a normal trauma response. It is the second stage of dealing with trauma.
Exactly. And it's about accepting that and then seeking help to work with that.
Right. And putting together a management plan for yourself.
Yeah. So finding those activities, like we mentioned before, those mindfulness activities that we just went through, the hearing, seeing, whatever, that's a really proactive and positive way to deal with anger. If you go to an anger management class, or you do see a therapist, they can actually take you through those processes of the physical side of things, the arousal, and how to help you calm down. They can take you through the behaviours that you actually exhibit, and look at other alternate ways that you can behave in situations when you're angry. And they can talk you through your thought processes and find other ways of thinking about yourself and the world to be more adaptive.
They can help you to figure out ways of dealing with all the other trauma responses and stuff. They're going to be linked to it too.
Exactly. So what's the one are we going to do next time? So we've got another 2 weeks before we get together again. I can't remember what the third one is that we're looking at.
The third one is the third stage in the stages of trauma, which is bargaining. So, yeah, I don't even have to tell you what it is.
Yeah, been there.
Yeah. Sounds like we got a lot to talk about.
I think we will have a lot to talk about. Thank you so much, Amanda. It's just been such a pleasure again talking with you. And I hope our listeners have found something valuable in our discussion today.
You can find out more about Growth from Darkness through the website www.growthfromdarkness.com. You can also learn more through the Facebook page, which can be found at facebook.com/growth from darkness. Thank you.